So I'm going to talk a little bit about inclusion and how we sort of do things with regards to SEND at Sheringham Nursery School. So here at Sheringham, we really pride ourselves on getting to know the children early on. So at the home visits, we speak to parents who know the children best, of course. And once they've started, we observe the children, and as a team, we discuss the children individually. We share our thoughts and observations with parents, offering them the opportunity to shed light on anything that we may have missed. Where we identify barriers, we discuss this with parents openly. We ask for their opinions and take their opinions into considerations. Sometimes parents actually come to us with barriers that they've identified at home, and of course we take this on board. But the main thing is we all work together to come to a conclusion about the right level of support that we should put in place for the child. Some children have speech and language difficulties that with the right level of support, those difficulties can be overcome. However, there are some children that have a higher level of need, so that may be social communication difficulties, physical needs or sensory needs, and they require a much higher level of support, and certainly for many, which is lifelong as well. So it's about identifying the need early on to be able to put the right level of support in place early on as well. It just gets the ball rolling for everyone. And the view of supporting children to overcome their barriers to learning is certainly a more social model of approach to SEND, which is very much different to the medical approach, which looks at SEND as being an issue with the child, that the problem is in the child. And I think leveled assessments sort of sit with that more medical approach. We know that there are some people who use the old development matters to make assessments to say that a 2-year-old is working at the birth to 11 months level. But actually that isn't appropriate. They aren't working younger. Our children with SEND have their own unique strengths and barriers to learning, which means that it's far more important for us to use a better assessment, such as developmental journals that we use at nursery. For example, we had a child at our nursery who had a dual diagnosis of cerebral palsy and autism. And if I'd used the leveled assessments to sort of map where he's at, then he would never have made progress. But because we used an alternative form of assessment with him, we used a developmental journal, we were able to celebrate some of the wonderful things that he managed to achieve in his 3 years at nursery. So holding a spoon, his first few steps, his first request at saying more, holding eye contact for more than 5 seconds to show us how happy he was by something. Those things wouldn't have been captured if we used the old development matters, for example, but they were in the alternative assessment that we used for him. So every child thriving is that they may not make the same achievements, but they are accessing a broad and balanced environment. And so from their starting points, they are making progress. Development matters is a starting point for some children, and we need to have systems in place for continuous improvement. So we need to make adaptations for the children so that they can access their curriculum. Something that supported us to make adaptations is the inclusive classroom profile. And the ICP was a fantastic tool in helping us to evaluate and improve how we sort of encourage inclusion at our nursery. And this 7-point scale made us sit and reflect on which parts of our nursery we needed to improve more on. So to give an example, and this is of course pre-COVID, once we sort of evaluated our nursery, we noticed that we needed to focus a little bit more on supporting peer interactions. So that's interactions between children who have SEND and children who don't. And there is a lot of research out there to indicate that children with SEND are more likely to be victims of bullying as they grow older and to have, fewer friendships. So that's why that particularly stood out to us. So we made a real effort and a real drive to ensure that we focused on encouraging those peer relations throughout the year. That was by delivering greater interventions around social skills and focusing more on it in our planning and making it more something to discuss amongst our sort of staff team, had training from our speech and language therapists as well. So my point is that, we adapted something that we already had in place to meet the needs of the children with SEND. And that's really key. It isn't about getting our children with SEND to fit in what we have, to fit in what we already have in place, but it's more us adapting what we're doing so it works for our children with SEND.